Mount Austin High. Once a beacon of knowledge, now a decaying carcass of memories. Abandoned for years, it stood on the edge of town, a grim reminder of a bygone era. The paint peeled, windows gaped like empty sockets, and the iron gates groaned a mournful dirge in the wind. Locals whispered of a tragedy, a fire that had consumed the school in a single night. Some murmured about a student driven mad by grief who had taken his own life within the charred walls. Whatever the truth, Mount Austin High had become a place of fear, shunned by all, until now. Max loved a good mystery. Ever since he was a little boy, he had been fascinated by tales of the unknown, the unexplained and the eerie. His room was filled with books about haunted places, unsolved crimes and mythical creatures. Each story he read only fueled his imagination and his desire to uncover the truth behind the legends. So when he heard the whispers about the haunted school on the hill, his curiosity was piqued. The old Mount Austin High had been abandoned for decades, and stories of ghostly apparitions and strange noises had circulated for years. Some said it was cursed, others believed it was just a place where the past refused to rest. He devoured every local legend, every hushed rumour. Max spent hours in the local library, poring over old newspapers and documents, trying to piece together the history of the school. He even talked to the town's elders, listening intently to their stories and warnings. Each tale was more intriguing than the last, and Max's determination grew stronger. He craved to experience it for himself, to feel the icy fingers of fear trace his spine. The thought of encountering something supernatural both terrified and thrilled him. He imagined what it would be like to walk through the dark, empty halls, to hear the whispers of the past, and to maybe, just maybe, see a ghost with his own eyes. One Saturday afternoon, armed with his trusty torch and a backpack full of snacks, Max decided to pay Mount Austin High a visit. He packed carefully, making sure he had everything he might need: a flashlight, extra batteries, a notebook to jot down any findings, and of course some snacks to keep his energy up. He was ready for an adventure. Ignoring the warnings of his friends and the nagging unease in his gut, he hopped off his bike at the foot of the hill. His friends had tried to dissuade him, telling him it was too dangerous, that he was crazy to go alone. But Max was determined. He felt a mix of excitement and fear as he looked up at the looming structure. The air hung heavy, thick, with the scent of damp earth and decay. The path leading up to the school was overgrown and treacherous, with roots and rocks jutting out at odd angles. The fog that clung to the ground made everything seem even more surreal, as if he had stepped into another world. He took a deep breath and began his ascent. Each step was a challenge, but Max was undeterred. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a mix of fear and exhilaration. As he climbed higher, the school came into clearer view, its windows dark and empty, like eyes watching his every move. Max knew there was no turning back now. The school loomed over him, more menacing up close. The door creaked open with a tortured groan, as if warning him back. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of sunlight that pierced the gloom. The air inside was stale and cold, heavy with the silence of ages. He wandered through deserted corridors, the floorboards groaning under his weight. Each footstep echoed in the deathly quiet, amplified by his racing heart. Shadows stretched and twisted, playing tricks on his eyes. He could have sworn he heard whispers, faint and chilling, but when he turned, there was nothing there. Or was there? The assembly hall was a cavernous space, its grandeur faded with time. The rows of seats were coated in dust, the stage bare except for a lone piano. He approached it cautiously, drawn by an unseen force. As he ran his hand over its dusty surface, he felt a sudden chill. A discordant chord echoed through the hall, seeming to emanate from the piano itself. He spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. He was alone. He tried to rationalize it, to blame the wind or a loose floorboard, but deep down he knew the truth. Mount Austin High was alive, and it was about to reveal its secrets. Section 5. A history steeped in tragedy. Later that day, back in the comfort of his room, Max delved into the local archives. The room was dimly lit, casting eerie shadows on the walls as he pored over the dusty documents. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and ink, a testament to the years of history contained within those pages. He unearthed old newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and forgotten yearbooks. Each piece of paper he touched seemed to whisper secrets of the past, stories long forgotten by the world outside. The photographs, though faded, captured moments of joy and sorrow, a stark contrast to the grim reality he was uncovering. Slowly, the tragic history of Mount Austin High unfurled before him. The headlines screamed of a disaster that had shaken the community to its core. The eerie photographs of the old school building seemed to hold a ghostly presence, as if the walls themselves remembered the horrors that had transpired. The fire, he discovered, had been no accident. It was a night of chaos and fear, flames licking the night sky as the school was engulfed in a fiery inferno. The historical footage showed the panic and despair of the townspeople as they watched their beloved institution burn. It had been a deliberate act of arson, a calculated move that left the community in shock. The flames were not just consuming the building, but also the dreams and hopes of the students who had walked its halls, a desperate cry for help by a student body terrorized by a group of bullies. The students, pushed to their limits, saw no other way out. Their faces, captured in the photographs, showed a mix of fear, anger and desperation. The ringleader, a boy named Thomas, had perished in the blaze. His portrait, now a memorial, was a haunting reminder of the tragedy. Thomas had been a bright student, full of potential, but his life was cut short in the most horrific way. But the student who had set the fire, driven to the brink by grief and guilt, had taken his own life within the burning building. The weight of his actions had been too much to bear, and in his final moments he chose to end his suffering in the very flames he had ignited. Could Thomas be the source of the haunting? The question lingered in Max's mind as he stared at the ghostly figure in the photograph. The shadows in the empty classroom seemed to move, as if the past was still very much alive within those walls. The tragic history of Mount Austin High was not just a story of the past, but a haunting presence that continued to echo through time. Section 6. The Janitor's Warning. The next morning Max returned to the school, this time seeking out the old janitor who lived in a small cottage at the foot of the hill. The man was hesitant to speak, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. But with some gentle persuasion and the promise of a warm meal, he finally relented. "They say Thomas walks the halls," he croaked, his voice raspy with age, angry at what was taken from him, seeking revenge. He looked at Max, his gaze intense. "You shouldn't be here, son. This place is cursed." Max ignored him, his curiosity burning brighter than ever. Section 7. The locked room at the end of the hall. Armed with this new information, Max returned to the school, drawn back like a moth to a flame. He wandered the corridors, searching for any sign of Thomas, for any clue that would unravel the mystery of Mount Austin High. He stumbled upon a locked room at the end of a deserted hallway. It was a classroom, its door secured with a heavy padlock. Peering through the grimy window pane, he saw a name scratched onto the surface of a dusty desk. Thomas. This was his room. He could feel it. He had to get inside. Section 8. A glimpse into the past. He spent the next few days meticulously picking the lock, his determination fueled by a mixture of fear and excitement. Each night, under the cover of darkness, he would sneak out, his heart pounding in his chest. The old school building loomed over him, its windows like dark, empty eyes watching his every move. He knew he was breaking the rules, but the mystery that lay behind that locked door was too enticing to resist. Finally, the lock yielded with a satisfying click. The sound echoed in the silent hallway, sending a shiver down his spine. He paused for a moment, listening for any signs of movement, but the building remained eerily quiet. It was as if the school itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked loudly, protesting the intrusion. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of dust and decay. He hesitated for a moment, his hand still on the doorknob, before stepping inside. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moonlight filtering through the dirty windows. The room was frozen in time. Desks were neatly arranged in rows, as if waiting for students who would never return. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building settling. He could almost hear the echoes of laughter and lessons from years gone by. Textbooks lay open on desks, their pages yellowed with age. He walked slowly between the rows, his fingers trailing over the dusty surfaces. Each book seemed to tell a story, a glimpse into the lives of the students who had once sat there, their hopes and dreams now long forgotten. A half-finished drawing adorned the chalkboard, a testament to a life cut short. The drawing was of a sunny day with children playing in the schoolyard. It was a stark contrast to the darkness that now filled the room. He wondered who had drawn it and what had happened to them. And in the corner he found a diary, its pages filled with Thomas's neat handwriting. The diary was old, the leather cover cracked and worn. He picked it up carefully, afraid it might fall apart in his hands. As he opened it, the pages crackled, revealing the thoughts and secrets of a boy long gone. As he read, a cold dread crept up his spine. The entries started off innocently enough, with descriptions of school days and friendships. But as he read on, the tone grew darker, filled with fear and desperation. Thomas had been tormented by something that had driven him to the brink of madness. The diary entries painted a picture of a troubled soul, consumed by darkness and despair. Thomas wrote of shadows that followed him, whispers that filled his mind with terrible thoughts. He had tried to tell the teachers, but no one believed him. They thought he was just a troubled boy, acting out for attention. The fire, it seemed, had not been an act of revenge, but a desperate attempt to escape the torment that plagued his mind. Thomas had set the fire, hoping to destroy the darkness that haunted him, but instead it had consumed him, leaving behind only ashes and unanswered questions. The school had been abandoned ever since, a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Section 9. Trapped. He was so engrossed in the diary that he didn't hear the door slam shut behind him. He spun around, his blood turning to ice. The padlock hung uselessly from the hasp. He was trapped. He rattled the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. He was a prisoner in Thomas's domain. Suddenly the air grew heavy, the temperature plummeting. He felt a presence in the room, cold and menacing. He was not alone. "Get out!" a voice whispered, chilling him to the bone. "This is my domain, to be continued."